Welcome back to Dark Horror Stories. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true disturbing stories from Seattle. These are tales of people who spent long nights on wet roads, quiet side streets, and forest edges, and ended up carrying home something far worse than a bad fare. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. Seattle rain has this way of making everything feel closer than it is. The taillights smear into red streaks, the sidewalks shine like oil, and every person waiting under a street lamp looks like they're standing in their own little world. I used to like that about driving nights. I'd keep the heat low, crack my window just enough to stop the glass from fogging, and let the city pass in pieces. Back then, I was doing rideshare 6 nights a week, mostly because rent in Ballard had gotten stupid, and because I'd told myself I was only doing it temporarily. That was before I started refusing trips east of the city after midnight. That night was in November, I think, maybe early December. I remember because I had one of those red holiday cups from a gas station, and the coffee tasted faintly like burnt plastic. My phone mount kept loosening every time I hit a pothole. I had peppermint gum stuck to the inside of my jacket pocket. My seat warmer on the driver's side had quit 2 weeks earlier, and the little pine tree air freshener under the vent had lost all its scent except a dusty sweetness if the heater ran too hard. None of that matters, really. It just sits in my head with the rest of it. I picked him up near Pioneer Square a little after 1 in the morning. He was standing under an awning by a closed tattoo shop. No umbrella, no coat, hood up, just letting the rain soak through this dark button-up shirt like he didn't notice. His name on the app was Nico Salazar. No rating showed up at first, which I figured was just the app glitching again. That happened sometimes downtown when my signal got weird between buildings. He opened the back door and got in without a word. Not slammed, not hesitant, just smooth. The first thing I noticed was that he smelled like wet cedar, not cologne or cigarettes or booze, just cedar and cold dirt. The second thing was that he didn't give me the usual little greeting people do when they're trying to prove they're normal. No, how's it going? No crazy weather. He just leaned back and said, "You can skip the freeway. I need to go by the old road." I glanced at the app. The destination was east, way farther than I liked going at that hour, up past North Bend near a service road I'd never heard of. Old road didn't mean anything to me, so I laughed a little and said the GPS would handle it. He said, "No, it won't." I told myself he was drunk, or one of those people who think drivers are part chauffeur, part hostage. I almost canceled, but the fare was high enough that I didn't. That still bothers me, not because I think I deserved what happened, just because I knew right away that I didn't want him in my car. The ride out of the city was quiet. Once we got on I-90, the rain got heavier, that hard, steady kind that sounds like handfuls of rice thrown at the windshield. My wipers made this tired rubber squeak on every pass. Nico sat so still I kept checking the mirror to make sure he was still there. A few times I caught him looking out the side window, not really at anything, just watching the tree line when the highway opened up. His face looked ordinary at first. Thin, dark hair stuck to his forehead, clean-shaven, maybe early 30s. Then I'd glance again and have the oddest feeling that I'd misremembered him, like his features shifted in the half-second between looking and looking away. I blamed the mirror. Rain does strange things with reflections. We left the main highway and started up a narrower road with no houses, no store lights, no traffic. The GPS tried to reroute twice, then froze on a pale gray map screen. I cursed, slapped the phone once, and Nico said very quietly, "I told you." That was the first time my hands started feeling wrong on the wheel. Too dry, like I'd washed them with harsh soap. I asked him how much farther. "Not far." A mile later he said, "Slow down, the turn is here." There was no turn, just a rusted gate and trees packed so tight behind it they looked woven together. I eased past and said, "That, you missed it." I stopped the car. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe because I was irritated. Maybe because the road was empty and the dark felt thick enough to lean on. I put the car in park and twisted around to tell him there was no road there. He was leaning forward between the seats, and his mouth was wrong. That's the part I still see. Not every night now, but enough. His lips hadn't opened downward the way a mouth should. They had pulled sideways, splitting along his cheek toward his ear as if something underneath was stretching the skin apart from inside. Not blood, not gore, nothing dramatic like that. Just a seam opening where no seam belonged, and behind it teeth that were too small and too even, like pebbles pressed into gum. I made this stupid sound, not a scream. More like when you touch something hot and don't mean to. Then he said, in exactly the same calm voice as before, "You have to let me out where it starts." I shoved my shoulder into the door and nearly dropped the car into drive without taking it out of park first. When I finally got it moving, he laughed, not loud, right by my ear, even though he was still in the back. I lurched forward maybe 30 feet before the engine died. The dash stayed lit. The radio stayed lit. The engine just cut out. Rain hammered the roof. My own breathing got so loud I couldn't hear anything else for a second. Then came one knock from above me, another. Then a dragging sound across the roof toward the windshield, like someone crawling flat on their stomach over the car. I didn't turn around. I hit the lock button 3 times even though the doors were already locked. I tried the ignition again and got nothing. My heart was kicking so hard in my throat it made me swallow between breaths. Then his voice came from the trees ahead of me. "Lena." I had never told him my name. The app hadn't shown it on the passenger side either. Drivers know that. Riders see the car, the plate, the first name if that, but not like that. Not the way he said it, close and familiar, like he'd been in my kitchen. A second voice answered from deeper in the woods. Also mine. Not exactly mine maybe, but near enough that every muscle in my back locked up. It said, "Don't leave the car." Then, from the left side of the road, Nico again. "That one isn't me." Something brushed down the rear window. Slow, measured. I looked despite myself, and for 1 second I saw a face pressed to the glass from outside. Not his face. No eyes at all, just smooth, rain-slick skin where the socket should have been, and beneath that a mouth opening sideways. I jammed the key again and the engine caught so violently the whole car shuddered. I didn't turn around. The road was too narrow, so I threw it into reverse and backed down that dark stretch way too fast, wheels slipping on wet gravel, branches smacking both sides of the car. At some point I heard something hit the trunk hard enough to dent it. I just kept going until I saw the first porch light, and then the next, and then a gas station that looked bright enough to cry over. I parked under the canopy and sat there while my hands shook against the steering wheel. I think I was there 20 minutes. Or 5. I'm bad with time when I'm scared. A clerk came out once to ask if I was okay, and I lied so automatically it almost made me laugh. When I finally got out to check the back seat, it was empty. No bag, no phone, no sign anyone had been there. For a minute I almost convinced myself I'd had some kind of panic episode. Lack of sleep, too much caffeine, long shift, dark road. I was reaching for that explanation as hard as I could. Then I saw the ceiling above the back seat. There was a muddy handprint pressed into the upholstery directly over where he'd been sitting. Long fingers, 6 of them, and in the fabric of the rear seat, tucked down near the buckle, there was a strip of wet green moss like it had fallen from somewhere overhead. I sold that car 3 months later. I didn't tell the buyer why the trunk lid didn't close quite right anymore. I still drive sometimes, but not nights and not east of the city. Every now and then, when it's raining hard enough to blur the mirror, I get that old dry feeling in my hands again. like I've missed a turn and something remembers. Story 2. The first airport runs of the morning were usually easy money. You'd catch people half awake with roller bags, maybe a flight attendant headed home, maybe somebody late for a conference trying not to show it. I liked those hours because Seattle hadn't fully switched on yet. The streets around Burien would still be glossy and empty, the coffee shops just unlocking their doors, and the sky over the Sound would go from black to this flat silver that made the ferries look like paper cutouts. I was living in White Center then, in a small apartment over a barber shop that always smelled like talc and bleach. I kept a mariner's cap on the dash because the morning sun hit my eyes coming north, even in winter. I had biscuit crumbs ground into the passenger seat from breakfast sandwiches, a chipped windshield nobody ever fixed, an aux cord that only worked if you bent it just right, and one of those cheap phone chargers that heated up so much I was sure it would start a fire someday. Normal stuff. The kind of stuff you remember because it was there before everything got bent out of shape. Her pickup was at a hotel by the airport just before dawn. Myril Obasi, 1 passenger. No checked luggage, just a small white box tied with a blue ribbon and a handbag tucked under one arm. She looked put together in that way people do when they're trying very hard not to come apart, not dressed for a party or a flight, dressed for something quiet. When she got in, she asked if I minded making one stop before the ferry terminal. I said sure. She told me Lincoln Park, the lower lot by the water. I remember glancing at her in the mirror and thinking maybe she was on her way to scatter ashes. It was the box, I think, and the way she held it like it weighed more than it should. She didn't look dangerous. She didn't look strange, just tired in a deep, private way. The drive west was quiet. My heater fan made that soft, clicking noise it always made on level 2. Somebody on the radio was talking too brightly about traffic that didn't exist yet. We passed bakery lights coming on, then rows of dark houses, then that long drop toward the water where dawn starts feeling colder instead of warmer. At the park, she asked if I could wait 10 minutes. "I'll tip you in the app," she said, and then gave me this small, embarrassed smile, like she knew how that sounded. I told myself it was fine because it was still early and there weren't many active rides yet. She got out with the white box and took the path down toward the seawall. For a few minutes, nothing happened. I watched gulls picking around the rocks. I ate the last half of a stale granola bar from the console. I answered a text from my sister and deleted it twice because I kept typing the wrong word. The windows fogged a little and I cracked mine to let the cold in. Then I heard Myril laugh. It came from directly behind the car. I checked the mirror. Empty lot, no one there. I leaned out the window and looked toward the path, figuring maybe sound was carrying funny off the water. There she was, I thought, halfway down by the rocks. A dark figure standing still with the box in both hands. Then her voice came again, much closer this time from the back seat. "Just 5 more minutes." I jerked so hard I hit my knee on the steering column. The back seat was empty. That was the point where I started making excuses for it. Open window, echo, tired brain, weird acoustics off the seawall. Water does strange things with sound. I've said that exact sentence to myself more than once since then. I got out of the car to clear my head. The cold air helped for maybe 3 seconds. Down on the rocks, the woman-shaped figure was no longer standing. It was on all fours, not crawling toward the water, climbing up from it. At first I thought she'd slipped. That was honestly my first thought because the rocks were slick and the tide was up. Then it lifted one arm onto the seawall and I saw the elbow bend the wrong way, sharp and backward, like it had been assembled from separate pieces and one of them had been put on upside down. I took 1 step back. The thing climbing the wall was wrapped in long, dark strands that I told myself were seaweed. Kelp, fishing line, anything. Its head stayed lowered as it came up, and I heard Myril's voice again, clear as if she were standing next to me. Darius, could you get the door?" I had not told her my name either. 6 gulls landed on the hood of my car in a straight line, not scattered, in a line all facing me. Their beaks opened at once, and from all 6 of them came the same little human laugh I'd heard the first time. I wish I had something better to say about what I did next. Something smart. I didn't do anything smart. I stumbled backward, slammed into the open driver's door, and nearly fell into my own seat. By then the thing had hauled itself fully onto the pavement. It was wearing her coat. That is the detail that still gets me. Not because it makes sense, it doesn't. It had those strips of black wet plant matter hanging off it, and its limbs were too long, and water poured off it in ropes, but around the shoulders was the exact beige coat Muriel had been wearing when she got out of my car. Its head tipped up. There was a face there, but soft around the edges, as if it had been remembered badly. The mouth sat a little too high. The eyes looked shut even when it moved. And along its neck, opening and closing in the gray dawn, were 3 thin slits that fluttered like gills. I threw the car into gear and sped out of the lot. So fast, the gulls rolled off the hood. In the mirror, I saw it reach the place where the pavement met the grass and stop. Not because it couldn't come farther, I don't know that. It just stopped and watched the car leave. I drove straight to Fauntleroy and sat in the ferry line, shaking so hard I couldn't get my card out of my wallet. A deckhand had to wave me forward twice before I realized boarding had started. I stayed in my car during the crossing with the doors locked and every window checked 3 times. By then I'd almost built myself a version of events I could live with. Some person in medical distress, bad light, shock, a woman gone into the water and me missing the rest. I was hanging on to that with both hands. Then I noticed the box. It was sitting upright on the back seat. The white ribbon was gone. The lid had caved in from damp. Inside there wasn't ash or cloth or keepsakes, just wet black sand and a funeral card swollen so badly the ink had bled. Her name was on the front. Inside, where a photo should have been, the paper had been rubbed blank except for 5 long salt gray streaks, like somebody had pressed a hand over her face and dragged downward. I called the company and told them I'd found property. Then I hung up before they could ask questions. I didn't turn it in. I wrapped the box in 2 trash bags and left it in a donation bin parking lot halfway across town, which I know sounds cowardly. Maybe it was. I still avoid the seawall at Lincoln Park. I don't care how pretty it is at sunset. If I hear gulls laughing now, I go somewhere else. And every once in a while, if my back seat is empty and I've been driving too long near the water, I hear a woman's voice ask me for 5 more minutes. I never give them. Story 3. A lot of Seattle drivers hate trail drop-offs, but I used to like them in daylight. They paid well, people were usually in a decent mood, and for half an hour you got out of the city noise and into that thick green quiet the foothills have. I drove afternoons mostly, between lunch and the evening airport rush, and I kept telling myself I was getting free scenery while other people sat in offices. That day was warm for spring. Or not warm exactly, but dry enough that everyone acted like summer had arrived. My car smelled faintly like dog hair from a golden retriever I'd driven that morning. There was a banana peel in the side pocket I kept forgetting to throw away, 2 gas receipts tucked under my thigh, a damp little patch on the passenger floor mat from somebody's leaking water bottle, and my AC had started making that basement smell when I turned it on too high. I remember my left knuckle was split from opening a package badly. Tiny details. Annoying at the time. I'd trade a lot to go back to being annoyed by small things. His name was Silas Armitage, pickup near the U District, destination a service road by Cougar Mountain. He looked like the kind of rider I got all the time up there. Hiking boots, day-pack, expensive rain shell tied around his waist, that bright kind of restless energy some people have when they've decided being outdoors counts as therapy. He was friendly enough. Asked if I'd been busy, apologized for the dog hair even though it wasn't his, offered me trail mix from a zip bag. Nothing off. As we got farther out, traffic thinned and the roads got narrower. He told me he was meeting a friend at a closed trail access point because the main lot would be crowded. I said I didn't think rideshare was supposed to go down maintenance roads, and he laughed and said it was fine. Everyone did. That should have been it. A little rule bending for extra money. The first odd thing was the road signs. 3 orange detour signs had been set up in a row, all facing into the woods instead of toward traffic. I noticed because one of them had a black streak across the middle that looked almost like a hand had been dragged through wet paint. I asked Silas if there was construction. He said, "Not that I know of." A minute later, we passed orange survey tape tied to branches on both sides of the road. Too much of it. Dozens of strips fluttering in the breeze like someone had marked every tree by hand. I figured maybe utility work. Maybe erosion control. There's always some boring answer available if you want one badly enough. We reached a yellow metal gate across the road. Beyond it, the gravel kept going uphill into the trees. Silas checked his phone and frowned. "My friend says he's just a little farther in. Do you mind waiting 10? He offered cash. Real cash, not app-tip promises. So I said yes. He hopped the gate and headed up the road at an easy jog, orange tape flicking around his legs as he passed it. I sat there with the engine running and the windows cracked, listening to birds and the ticking of my cooling dashboard. A crow landed on the gate, stared at me too long, then flew off. Somewhere uphill, a metal clang rang out once like someone dropping a tool. I told myself there really was a work crew nearby. Then came a knock on my rear passenger window. 3 taps, evenly spaced. I turned, expecting Silas. Nobody. I checked the mirror. Empty road. Trees, brush, gate, my own stupid face. I laughed at myself, but not because it was funny. More because that's what you do when a little thread of fear starts pulling and you don't want it to. A second set of taps came on the driver's side rear window. Same rhythm. I locked the doors. That felt dramatic, so of course I immediately started arguing with myself. Probably twigs. Maybe gravel flicked by the fan. Maybe a bird pecking. I was in broad daylight, not some midnight horror movie. Then 3 figures stepped out of the trees uphill. At first I thought they were road workers. They wore orange reflective vests and hard hats and carried round signs on poles. But they weren't walking downhill so much as arriving there, if that makes sense. One moment trunks and brush, next moment bodies in front of them as if my eyes had skipped. They spread across the road shoulder to shoulder. Each of them lifted a sign. Instead of stop or slow, all 3 signs said wait. Black letters on dull white circles. No logos, no scuffs, just wait. I stared maybe 2 seconds too long before my brain caught the rest. The reflective strips weren't sewn onto the vests. They passed through skin. Silver bands stapled straight across bare chests and throats, disappearing under gray flesh and coming back out again. One hard hat sat too low because the head beneath it was narrow as a shovel. I grabbed my phone to call Silas and had no signal at all. 1 bar, then none. The center figure raised a hand and gave me a traffic wave to come forward. That did it. That was the moment my body decided before my mind did. My scalp tightened. My mouth went dry so fast I could taste pennies. I threw the car into reverse. Before I moved an inch, Silas came sprinting around the bend uphill. He was white as paper, not injured that I could see, just terrified in this focused, disbelieving way. He vaulted the gate instead of opening it, yanked the rear door and screamed for me to go. The 3 figures didn't run, they drifted. That's the only word for it. Their legs moved in short jerks, but their bodies slid over the gravel without bouncing. One of them slapped a palm on my hood as I reversed, and the sound was flat and heavy like wet concrete hitting metal. When I glanced over, its fingers were capped in black gravel dust, and in the center of its hand was a little drilled hole I could see daylight through. Silas kept yelling, "Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop." We flew backwards down that road, way faster than anyone should. I clipped brush on both sides and nearly dropped into the ditch twice. One of the wait signs hit the windshield and bounced away. In the mirror, the figures were still coming, never hurrying, never slowing, just sliding between the trees while the strips on their bodies flashed in the sun. At the first paved road, I spun the car around so hard my tires screamed. I didn't stop until we hit a gas station in Newcastle, crowded with people and kids and dogs and all the noise in the world. Silas got out and vomited in the shrubs by the ice machine. We sat on the curb for a while before either of us said anything useful. He told me he'd heard voices farther up the road directing traffic around a bend, except the voices were all saying his name in flat unison. Then he saw one of those things standing in the middle of the road, holding a sign low against its legs like it had been waiting for him specifically. We didn't file reports. We didn't go back. I almost convinced myself afterward that we'd stumbled onto some grotesque art installation, or people in costumes, or heat and adrenaline making details mutate. I was halfway through believing that when I took my car through the wash the next morning. Wrapped tight around the rear axle was a strip of orange survey tape, not fluttering loose, knotted, and printed over and over down its length in faded black letters were the words "Road Closed." The knot was so tight I had to cut it off. I don't do trailhead drop-offs anymore. If somebody's destination pin lands on a service road, I cancel. I know how that sounds. Petty, superstitious, irrational. Maybe it is. But if you've ever had something made to control traffic raise a hand for you alone, you stop worrying about sounding reasonable. Story 4. There's a kind of dark you get around the edges of Magnuson Park after midnight that doesn't feel like city dark. You can still hear traffic if the wind is right, and sometimes a plane will pass low enough to remind you where you are, but the old buildings and wetlands soak up noise in a strange way. The place feels left over, like the city forgot to finish turning it into whatever it's supposed to be now. I was doing graveyard shifts then because my sleep schedule was wrecked anyway. I'd keep deli wrappers in the console longer than I should, leave work gloves in the door pocket from helping my brother move, track sand onto my own floor mats, and drive with the dashboard lights turned dim blue because brighter ones gave me headaches. My wipers squeaked on the dry glass every time I forgot to switch them fully off. Little ugly habits. The life of someone always telling himself he'd clean the car properly tomorrow. Her pickup was near Sand Point Way. Gwen Rook, one stop. No conversation at first. She was in her 40s maybe, wearing a long green raincoat and carrying one of those flat plastic file boxes people use for paperwork. She didn't look like trouble. She looked like somebody coming off a late shift at an office that didn't pay enough. The destination pin landed near one of the closed service lots by the wetlands. I said, "You sure that's right?" She glanced at the screen and said, "As far as you can go. My cottage is beyond the gate." Cottage made me think legal rental, maybe park housing, maybe old caretaker quarters. I didn't know. Seattle has pockets like that. She asked if I'd wait while she grabbed something she'd forgotten. I should have said no. It was late, it was drizzling, and that part of the park always made me feel like I'd driven into the pause between radio stations. But she sounded tired more than anything else, and I'd already had 2 canceled trips in a row. So I drove through the empty lot until a chain blocked the road. Beyond it was a narrow lane between blackberry tangles and reeds, disappearing toward a dark line of trees. Gwen got out with the file box, then lined back down to the open window. "If you hear knocking under the car," she said, "don't get out." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She didn't laugh back. Then she walked away down the lane, rain beading on the shoulders of her coat, and was swallowed up by the dark so quickly it didn't feel natural. I sat there with the engine idling and told myself she was eccentric. People say odd things when they've lived alone too long. That was my rational explanation. I used it right up until the knocking started. One knock from somewhere under the passenger side. Pause. 2 knocks from directly beneath my seat. I froze, then got angry at myself for freezing. It was probably a raccoon. Magnusson had raccoons, possums, all kinds of junk-loving creatures. The lot backed up against wetlands. There were 100 normal explanations. Then something scraped along the underside of the car from rear to front in one slow, deliberate drag. Not claws, more like a heavy zipper pulled across metal. My hands went slick on the wheel. I checked the mirrors and saw nothing but drizzle and the wet blur of reeds. I leaned forward, peering through the windshield, and that's when I noticed the top edge of the passenger window flex inward, just a fraction, as if something had gripped the outside frame. I turned my head. A human hand was hooked over the roof above the passenger door. Not reaching up from outside like somebody standing there. Hooked over from below, fingers curling down the glass as if the arm attached to it had come up the far side of the car over the roof and was hanging there upside down. The nails were packed with black mud. The knuckles bent too many times. I made myself look away, then immediately looked back because my brain refused to place what I was seeing. The hand was gone. A wet thump landed on the trunk, then another on the roof. I don't remember unbuckling. I remember the seat belt burning across my neck because I got tangled in it while lunging for the driver's door. I bolted out into the drizzle and ran without any plan except away. My shoes slapped through shallow puddles. Reeds whipped my face. Somewhere behind me metal creaked under shifting weight as if whatever had been on the car was redistributing itself. I hit the chain at the lot entrance, scrambled over it badly, and tore my palm open on the link. Across from the lot, there was a fenced utility area with stacked kayaks and maintenance sheds. I vaulted that fence too, less gracefully, and climbed onto the low roof of a storage building because it was the first thing with height. From up there, I could see my car. At first, nothing moved. Then something unfolded from beneath it. I have to be careful even now not to pretend I understood what I saw. I didn't. It was pale in the way things are pale when they've never had light on them. Not white, more the color of soaked paper. Its body stayed close to the asphalt, shoulder blades shifting under skin as flat as wet cloth. It had arms long enough that its hands touched ahead of its head when it moved. And when it turned toward the lane Gwen had taken, its chest opened and closed with a rippling motion, like it was breathing through its ribs instead of its mouth. The worst part wasn't its face. The face was almost a relief because it was small and unfinished and I didn't have to look at it long. The worst part was when it climbed back onto my car and I heard the roof cave inward 1 inch at a time. I shouted then. I didn't mean to, just some useless noise into the rain. A flashlight beam snapped on from the lane. Gwen was coming back, fast now, and she was yelling something I couldn't make out. The thing on my car dropped flat again and slid under the chassis so quickly it looked pulled by a rope. She reached the driver's side and banged a fist against the hood 3 times, hard, like a signal. Nothing came back out. We stayed there until the first gray strip of morning showed above the buildings. I didn't climb down until birds started up and the lot looked like a place again instead of a mouth. Gwen wouldn't explain anything. She just said, "You waited too near the culvert," like that should have covered it. I wanted to ask what the hell she meant by that, but my throat felt scraped raw and I was suddenly desperate to be gone. When I got home, I found a line of dents running across the roof from back windshield to sun visor area, evenly spaced like someone had pressed a row of knees into the metal. Under the passenger side floor mat, bent nearly in half, was the jack handle from my trunk. It had crescent bite marks in it, not scratches, not rust damage, bite marks. I quit night driving after that. I also stopped taking water-adjacent pickups if they end in places with gates. Sometimes when rain starts tapping the roof at a red light, my shoulders lock before I can stop them. I still think about the way that hand hung over the glass, not reaching for me, holding on. Story 5. the eastbound rides after midnight always felt longer than the app claimed. Maybe it was the mountains getting closer. Maybe it was the way streetlights gave up one by one until all you had were your own headlights and whatever was willing to stand just outside them. Most drivers I knew hated those trips. I took them because the money was better and because, at that point in my life, I wasn't especially careful with myself. I'd been splitting time between Seattle and my sister's place in Bellevue after a breakup, which meant I basically lived out of my car. There were cup holder pennies rattling every time I turned, headache powder in the glove box, a charging cable tied in a knot because it only worked at one angle, a hoodie with a busted zipper on the passenger seat, and an old Pine air freshener hanging from the signal stalk because I'd lost the elastic. One of my headlights was dimmer than the other, which I kept meaning to fix and never did. The rider was Odette Kravick, pickup in Capitol Hill, destination near Rattlesnake Lake. She got in carrying a grocery bag and a ring of keys big enough to belong to a janitor. Mid-30s maybe. Face drawn not from drinking but from worrying. She said her brother had left medication at their family cabin and she needed to get it before morning. That all sounded plausible. Rich people have cabins. Seattle is full of them. She was paying surge and tipped up front in cash, which I know should not matter when you're listening to your gut, but money can make your instincts sound snobbish and inconvenient. The farther east we drove, the quieter she got. She stared out the window and kept rubbing her thumb over one of the keys on the ring as if it were lucky or meaningful somehow. Rain had passed through earlier, and the road still shone black. Every now and then fog drifted low between the trees. My dim headlight made the shoulder look lopsided. At a turnout above the lake, she told me to keep going. There's a private road. There was, sort of, more of a cracked lane with grass up the middle and no sign I could read in the dark. I said, I don't know if I'm supposed to be on this. She said, nobody comes up anymore. That should have landed harder than it did. We climbed through a stand of cedar until the cabin came into view. One story, dark windows, porch sagging on one side. Not derelict exactly. Just absent, like nobody had laughed there in years. Odette asked if I'd wait. I was getting ready to tell her absolutely not when she said 5 minutes tops. So I kept the engine running and watched her go up the porch steps. She unlocked the door, disappeared inside, and that was that. The silence out there felt layered. Engine idle underneath, ticking dash, a branch brushing the roof once, then farther out the drip of water through trees. I checked my phone. No signal. Fine. Rural dead zone. Normal. Then I glanced at the driver's side mirror. The road behind me looked wrong. Not empty wrong. Longer. As if the mirror weren't reflecting the lane I'd driven in on, but a second version of it stretched farther into the woods than it should have. More trees. Different bend. A strip of pale water where no ditch was. I shifted in my seat and looked over my shoulder. Real road, short, ending at the turn. Mirror road, still there. I told myself it was angle and darkness. Side mirrors distort distance. Everybody knows that. I actually said it out loud, which is embarrassing now. Then a figure appeared in the mirror road. Tall, but not in the usual scary story way. Taller because it was made wrong. Its body was narrow and ridged like peeled cedar bark standing upright. Bits of it lifted and settled in the night breeze. It paced beside the reflected road without getting closer or farther, just matching the car at a walk, though my car was parked. I shut my eyes, opened them. Still there, then the rear passenger door clicked. Not opened, unlocked. I spun around, empty seat. The lock button on my door was still down. From the cabin, I heard Odette scream one word I couldn't make out, or maybe two. It came thin through the trees and cut off too fast. I jumped out and ran to the porch before I had time to decide whether that was smart. The front door hung open. Inside smelled like old dust and wet wood. My phone flashlight showed a couch draped in sheets, stacked boxes, a lamp tipped on its side. No Odette. I called her name once, then regretted it immediately because the house answered back in a voice that sounded almost like mine saying, "Up here." There was no upstairs. The sound had come from the hallway mirror nailed crooked beside the coat hooks. In that mirror I saw the front room behind me exactly as it was, except someone was standing inside the reflected doorway to the kitchen. Same bark-ridged shape from the car mirror, only closer now, shoulders shedding little curls of pale wood onto the reflected floor. I did not turn around. Maybe that was instinct, maybe cowardice. I backed straight toward the open door while keeping my eyes on the mirror. The thing inside it tipped its head, and I saw that where a face should have been there were layers, like strips of bark peeled back one by one. Deep in the center of that split, two flat, wet human teeth sat alone. I ran. Not back to the house, not into the trees. Back to the car because it was the one idea my body still trusted. I got in, slammed the lock, and looked at the side mirror. The reflected road was gone, so was Odette. What replaced them was my own back seat, shown in the mirror at an angle that should have been impossible. Something was sitting there, not fully visible, just knees. Sharp, bark-colored knees pressed together politely in the rear passenger side seat. I tore the mirror inward with my bare hand so hard it snapped against the window. Then I drove. I didn't bother turning around. I took the lane too fast, hit ruts hard enough to bottom out once, and finally lost the road entirely near the Lakeshore Trail pullout. I ditched the car there and ran toward the sound of the river because moving water felt like direction. I kept one hand on the guardrail until I found the main road and flagged down a delivery van before daylight. Police later said there was no cabin at the location I'd given. Just an old foundation and some storm-fallen cedar. I almost let that rewrite everything for me. I almost accepted it. Then the mechanic called about my car. He asked if I'd backed into a tree branch because my folded side mirror housing was packed with long, damp splinters. He said they smelled fresh, like somebody had shaved cedar straight into the motor. Wedged behind the glass, too deep to remove without taking the mirror apart, was one key from Odette's ring. I never saw her again. Sometimes I think about the grocery bag she brought in and realize I don't remember what was in it. Sometimes I wonder if she was a woman with a problem, or part of the problem, or if that distinction stopped mattering the moment I turned onto that road. Either way, I don't trust mirrors on forest roads anymore. Not when they try to show you something that's keeping pace. Story 6. By November, the blackberry along the edges of Seattle starts looking mean. Not dead exactly, just blackened and wiry and ready to grab at sleeves. I noticed that more once I started driving the south end at night. Renton, Skyway, the industrial stretches where the streetlights space out and the roads start feeling half-finished. People talk about city driving like the danger is all other people. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the patches in between. I'd had a long shift already. My thermos coffee was cold. My cinnamon gum had lost its flavor. The fake leather on the steering wheel was peeling under my thumb, and I dug an old paper map out of the glove box earlier because my app kept freezing in low-signal spots. There was a cracked pair of sunglasses in the cup holder and a fast food receipt stuck to the floor by something sugary. I remember all that because the night felt ordinary right up until it stopped. The pickup was outside a bar in Renton. Cala Benavides. One rider. Destination pin near an old quarry access road off a trail system I barely knew. She got in alone, but she kept turning around to look out the back window like she expected friends to appear. Mid-20s maybe. Mud on her shoes, mascara smudged at the corners, breathing too fast for somebody just going home. "Can you drive a little past the pin?" she asked. My brother's phone died and he's somewhere by the lot. I almost said no on principle. Then she held up her own phone and showed me a text thread full of missed calls and half-cent location drops. It felt real enough, The road narrowed as we went, houses thinned out. Then came chain link fences, power lines, brush, and finally a gravel lot with a busted sign. The destination pins spun and corrected twice. No other cars there. Kala tried calling again. No answer. She said she saw his backpack by the trail earlier and asked if I'd wait while she checked just past the gate. I told her 2 minutes. She nodded too fast and hurried into the dark, phone flashlight bobbing. I sat there with the engine running and told myself this was just annoying, family drama, drunk sibling, bad timing. Then her phone started ringing, not in her hand, in my back seat. She'd left it there in the rush. I turned to grab it and the sound stopped. Before I touched it, it started again, not from the seat this time, from the blackberry thicket just beyond my driver's window. I stared at the dark vines and actually laughed under my breath because the alternative was panic. Maybe she dropped a second phone, maybe sound was bouncing, maybe some kid was messing with me. There are always explanations if you're willing to make them ugly enough. The ringtone started moving through the thicket, not fast, just weaving deeper, a few feet at a time, then stopping, like someone carrying the sound farther in. I locked the doors. A minute later, Kala came running back through the gate. At least, I thought it was her. The gate was right, the jacket was right, the phone light was missing, but she was moving toward the car with both hands out like she wanted me to unlock it quickly. Then she hit the edge of my headlights. It was woven, that's the only word I have. Human-sized, shaped roughly like a woman in a jacket, but made from loops of blackberry cane and wet leaves twisted together tight enough to hold a body. Thorns stuck out where lashes should have been. The hood of Kala's sweatshirt had been worked over the top of it like a skin, and where its mouth should have been, the vines parted and my phone number appeared on the screen of Kala's forgotten phone in the back seat. Then the ringtone began again from inside the thing's thorn mouth. I hit the horn so hard my palm hurt. The thing jerked at the sound, then cocked its head. More shapes shifted in the thicket behind it. Smaller ones, 3, maybe 4, hard to tell among the branches. I threw the car into reverse, but one rear tire spun uselessly in loose gravel. The little woven figure took a step closer, and I heard the soft crackle of thorns dragging over each other. Another ringtone started up behind me. Same tone, same rhythm. I grabbed Kala's phone from the seat and flung it out the passenger window on instinct, like returning stolen property might matter. Something in the brush to my right dove after it. The car caught traction. I shot backward out of the lot, fishtailed, corrected, and made it maybe 100 yards before headlights coming the other way forced me to stop. It was Kala on foot, real Kala, waving both arms and sobbing so hard she could barely talk. Her brother had never been there. She'd gotten a text from his number telling her to come alone. When she reached the gate, she'd seen a backpack hanging in the blackberry with no ground under it, just hanging there at chest height like it had grown from the vines. We didn't stay to compare details. I shoved her into the passenger seat and drove until we hit a lit convenience store. She called family, I called nobody. I tried later to reduce it to a prank, woven art, drunk misperception, a person in brush with a speaker. I worked that angle hard because I wanted it to be stupid. The next morning, while vacuuming the car, I found a thorn lodged in the seam of the driver's seatbelt near my shoulder. It was long, dark, and hooked backward at the tip. Threaded on it like a bead was my spare house key. It had been on my ring in the ignition all night. I moved apartments after that, not because I thought a bramble thing could track me through Seattle. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I wanted a different lock, a different street, different windows. Sometimes that's all surviving amounts to, putting distance between yourself and the place where something learned your shape. Story 7. Snow changes Seattle drivers. Half of us get cautious and half of us lose our minds, and the roads become this slow-moving argument nobody wins. The night of my last long mountain fair, the city had only gotten a thin layer, but farther east the forecasts kept threatening more. I should have stayed close in, done short trips, called it early. Instead, I chased surge. My car smelled like stale fries and wet wool. There was a snow brush in the back footwell, hand warmers rolling around in the door pocket, a blanket somebody had forgotten weeks before, and a playlist on my phone that kept restarting from the same song because the app needed updating. The heater worked too well on the passenger side and barely at all by my feet, so I drove with one leg warm and one half numb. It was an irritating night. That's how it started, just irritating. The pickup was downtown near a hotel entrance glowing blue in the slush. Callum Baird, destination east of North Bend. He was maybe late 30s, maybe older. Clean coat, no luggage, snow melting in his hair. He got in and said, "My wife's stranded near the overflow lot. I can't get a signal through to anyone. I'll pay double if you can take me." I asked which overflow lot. He named one near Mount C. That wasn't ideal, but it wasn't absurd either. People get stuck out there. People make dumb choices in weather. He sounded strained in a believable way, kept rubbing his hands together, kept looking at his dead phone screen like it might change out of guilt. The roads worsened gradually. City slush to black wet pavement, then patches of packed snow at the edges, then dark shoulders disappearing into pines. Callum grew quieter the farther we went. Once I asked if his wife had texted any landmarks, and he said, "She said there were a lot of cars." When we turned into the overflow area, my headlights caught rows of parked vehicles under a thin skin of snow. Too many of them, for that weather, for that hour, for that season, honestly. No lights on. No people moving. Callum leaned forward between the seats. There. I followed his finger to the far end of the lot where a single sedan sat angled toward the trees. When I looked back to say something, he was gone. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like I'm skipping something. Door opening maybe, seat shifting, cold air rushing in. None of that. He was leaning between the seats 1 second, and the next the back seat was empty except for the blanket. I locked the doors so hard I nearly broke the button. Then my headlights passed across the nearest parked car. There was a handprint on the inside of its windshield. A clear one, palm and finger spread in the fogged glass. I looked at the next car. Another handprint, inside again, then the next and the next. Every vehicle in that lot had them. Some single, some dozens, layered over each other like people had been pressing their hands against the glass from within while the snow fell outside. My brain went hunting for explanations so quickly it made me dizzy. Condensation from old passengers, kids messing around, search and rescue training, something boring, anything boring. I was halfway to one when all the interior dome lights in the lot came on at once. Yellow squares inside dark cars, and shapes lit up in the driver's seats, not moving at first. Just there, one in each vehicle, heads bowed. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood, and that helped a little. Pain can make things feel real in a useful way. Then every single shape lifted its head toward me. No faces, or not enough of one, just pale ovals above coats and scarves and the vague suggestion of mouths pressed too low. My engine sputtered and died. That sound broke the stillness in the lot. The nearest parked car rocked once like someone inside had put both hands on the dashboard and leaned forward. Then another rocked, then all of them. A soft, uneven thudding traveled through the rows as doors started bumping from inside. Not opening, testing. I curled into myself behind the wheel and tried the ignition. Nothing. Again, nothing. My breath fogged the windshield so fast I had to wipe a circle clear with my sleeve. In that clear patch, a figure crossed in front of my headlights. Callum, I thought at first, only it was too smooth. Coat right, height right, but the stride had no weight to it, feet passing over the snow without digging in. It stopped directly in front of the hood and bent down until its blank face filled the lower half of my windshield. Then a hand struck the rear passenger window from inside the car. I screamed, full, ugly, involuntary. I spun around. There, pressed against the glass behind me, was a face shaped from condensation alone. Not flesh, not somebody hiding in the back. Just a perfect human outline forming in the fog on the inside of the window, and at the center of it, two dry, clear spots where eyes should have been. I think that's the closest I came to passing out. My vision tunneled, my fingers went numb. Somewhere outside, car doors all over the lot began opening together with little muffled crunches in the snow. Then, from far off on the main road, came the yellow sweep of a plow truck's lights. The figure at my hood lifted its head. Every dome light in the lot snapped off. My engine turned over on the next try like nothing had happened. I didn't wait to see anything else. I drove straight out of there, slipping once at the exit and correcting purely on panic. The plow driver honked as I passed him, and I nearly drove into the ditch anyway. At a gas station in North Bend, I made myself check the back seat before I'd let myself call my husband. Empty. No Callum. No footprints in the snow tracked across the floor mat. No ordinary proof of any passenger at all. I could have almost lived inside that lack of proof. Then I saw the blanket, folded neatly in the center of the back seat, not how it had been before. Across the top of it lay a row of little wet half-moons, as if someone had set down all 10 fingertips at once and pressed gently. The fabric stayed cold the rest of the day, even after I brought it inside. I quit Rideshare a week later. People think the snow lot story was the reason, and maybe it was. But if I'm honest, it was the waiting after. The way every winter forecast made my stomach feel hollow. The way parked cars started looking occupied even when they were. If I pass an overflow lot now and see vehicles sitting too still under snow, I keep driving. I don't check the windows anymore. Welcome back to Dark Horror Stories. Those were 7 disturbing rideshare driver horror stories from Seattle, and if one of them got under your skin, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.